How's it going, everybody? My name is LuckyBunz. In today's video, I'm going to be going over the best Pokemon to power up against Team Go Rocket grunts and leaders in Pokemon Go. So practically every Pokemon mentioned in this video is going to have dual functionality of some type, which means that they might also be useful in raids, PvP, or both. These recommendations will be a bit more aggressive than my typical recommendations for raids, mainly because the Shadow Pokemon from Rocket Grunts are significantly stronger. Now for any new or returning players watching this video, I think the most important question to highlight is what makes farming these Team Go Rocket grunts and leaders actually worth it. Well, for starters, they offer some of the best Pokemon you can actually use in the game. Shadow Pokemon offer 20% more damage while also having the drawback of a 20% defense reduction. Still, this makes them extremely powerful when it comes down to the DPS metric, damage per second. You also can't trade Shadow Pokemon, which means farming good IVs actually takes a decent amount of time. Therefore, you want to do as many of these as possible when possible. The team leaders offer the chance at a potential Shadow Shiny Pokemon as well, which are arguably some of the rarest Pokemon to obtain in the game. Some of the Rocket Grunts offer the chance for a potential Shadow Shiny too, but these Pokemon have a much lower Shiny rate. Now with that being said, the team leaders do require a Rocket Radar to battle them, but this can be obtained by defeating 6 Team Go Rocket Grunts and collecting mysterious components, which will turn into a Rocket Radar. Now unfortunately, you can only hold on to one of these in your inventory unless you buy more from the shop, collect mysterious components from field research quests, or get it as a reward from a special research quest. So basically just make sure to use these as soon as you get them, that way you can start getting the components for the next radar from battling Team Go Rocket Grunts. But now with that being said, I think it's time we take a look at the best Pokemon to power up for Rockets in Pokemon Go. So our first Pokemon that we're going to talk about is going to be Apex Shadow Ho-Oh with Incinerate plus Sacred Fire plus and Brave Bird. This Pokemon is phenomenal, right? So Apex Shadow Ho-Oh is better than the typical Shadow Ho-Oh, and so with Incinerate, this Pokemon completely shreds through anything that is going to be weak to fire. It honestly can 2-hit Pokemon at times, and in other situations, maybe 3 to 4 hit. It builds up to Sacred Fire incredibly quick as well with Incinerate, and by the time you can actually get to that final Pokemon, you could just throw a Sacred Fire, one-shot it, and now you're pretty much done with the battle. Now, unfortunately, Apex Shadow Ho-Oh was a limited release Pokemon, so you can only get this Pokemon from the Masterwork research during the Johto Tour event, which was a few years ago. So if you don't have it, that is okay. We have a few other options I'm going to go over right now. The next Pokemon is going to be Ultra League Talonflame. So you might be wondering, well, why Ultra League Talonflame? Well, here's where the dual functionality comes in. So Talonflame for the Ultra League actually powers up as the Hundo, not a typical PvP IV spread. For those unaware, in Great League and Ultra League, the typical PvP IV spread is going to be 0-15-15 because you want to maximize the amount of power you can actually get out of that Pokemon before it hits that CP limit. Now in the case of Talonflame, once you actually power it up to level 50, it comes in right under 2500 CP, which means you would ideally want to get the Hundo, not a 0-15-15 IV spread. Now with that being said, Talonflame is also ranked at number 28 currently in the Open Ultra League meta, but why exactly is it so good to use against these Team Go Rocket grunts? Well, I mentioned Incinerate earlier, right? So the exclusive Comday moveset on Talonflame when you evolve it from Fletchling is going to be Incinerate, and then it also has access to Flame Charge and Fly as the charge moves. Flame Charge will boost your attack by 1 stage every single time you throw it, and with Incinerate, you can actually build up to this incredibly fast. So you can get up to 4 potential charges on Flame Charge, basically 4 attack boosts, and at that point, you're just going to completely annihilate whatever is left in your way. But this Pokemon is essentially a great one to focus on building for a long period of time. Like again, this is a pretty heavy Pokemon, right? Level 50 requires 296 extra large candy, and so like this is going to be a project Pokemon for most of you. But at the end result, you can use it for the Ultra League as well as for Rocket Battles. Next up, let's talk about a Pokemon that doesn't require extra large candy. That's going to be Ultra League Typhlosion. So you could also run this as a Shadow Typhlosion as well, which actually does even more damage. But once again, it is going to have that 20% defense reduction. Now, as far as the moveset goes for Typhlosion, you want it to have Incinerate plus the Legacy Comday moveset Blast Burn, along with Thunder Punch. So Thunder Punch is going to be a really spammy moveset. Like, it literally gets a Thunder Punch after 2 Incinerates. This is what makes Typhlosion so good because you can really take advantage of the stun lock from Team Go Rocket grunts and just spam Thunder Punch, throw Incinerate, and you're going to be able to get through those Rocket Battles pretty quickly. Even though Typhlosion doesn't have like as much bulk as Talonflame, its overall damage plus the spammy moveset is just incredible. Next up, let's take a look at Kartana as our featured Pokemon. So you ideally want to go with Razor Leaf plus Leaf Blade. There are going to be no legacy movesets required on this Pokemon, which makes it really nice. And you don't even have to have that secondary charge move unlocked because Razor Leaf plus Leaf Blade is pretty much all that you need. There are going to be quite a few Pokemon that you run into that are going to be double weak to grass types, and honestly even just the single typings that are weak to grass types, that still gets destroyed by Kartana. But the ones that are like water and ground or water and rock oh my goodness, Kartana just annihilates them. Now Kartana is going to be an Ultra Beast Pokemon, which essentially is going to cost the same as a legendary Pokemon, so it might be a little bit more difficult to acquire this Pokemon, but we did just recently have it featured during Pokemon GO Fest, so hopefully some of you guys were able to get your hands on one of these with decent IVs. If you weren't, try to lucky trade for one, because let me tell you this right now, in terms of the grass type category, Kartana is the MVP. It is the best non-mega, non-shadow grass type attacker in the game. Now on the off chance if you don't actually have Kartana, what's the next best option you can go for? So we have two. The next one is going to be Shadow Torterra, which I haven't actually powered up myself, but with Razor Leaf plus Frenzy Plant, the Legacy Comday moveset, this Pokemon is also a beast. Essentially, the key move you want to have here is going to be Razor Leaf on your Pokemon. So basically, the extra Shadow Boost on Torterra plus Razor Leaf, deadly combo. Not as good as Kartana, but still very, very close. Now, if you don't have either of those two options, which would be understandable because they're both pretty hard to get, the next more accessible option would be Roserade, which evolves from Roselia with a Sinnoh Stone, I believe, at 100 candy. Now for Roserade, you can definitely get dual functionality out of this Pokemon, as it does have relevance in the open Ultra League format, so you can power up an IV spread for that and then use it for the rocket battles if you want to as well. The moveset is going to vary a little bit though when it comes down to the Ultra League. You want to ideally have Poison Jab plus the Legacy Comday moveset Weather Ball along with Grass Knot. So you could just interchange the fast moves, right, because you want to have Razor Leaf if you're going to be using it against Rockets, but Poison Jab if you're going to be using it in Ultra League. So if you don't have Kartana, considering the dual functionality, Roserade would still be a good option to go for. Alright, next up let's talk about some water types. So we're going to talk about Shadow Kyogre first, and you can also use regular Kyogre, but Shadow Kyogre is just much better. We just recently had Shadow Kyogre featured from January to March this year, so if you were able to get your hands on a Shadow Kyogre from Giovanni, this Pokemon is excellent. You ideally want to have Waterfall plus Surf and the move of your choice, so you can either run Blizzard, Thunder, or you can get access to the exclusive signature moveset, Origin Pulse. So this is going to require an Elite TM, but I will tell you this right now, it is definitely worth it. Now the reason why I recommend this is mainly just to increase your DPS, so basically when you get to that final Pokemon, like Surf is a good moveset to have, it'll pretty much get the job done, but it's not going to one-shot the Pokemon. Whereas if you build up to an Origin Pulse, that is definitely going to one-shot the Pokemon. So yeah, Shadow Kyogre, Waterfall plus Surf, and Origin Pulse would be my recommended moveset, but again, you could also go with Thunder or Blizzard depending on how you want to actually run it. Now if you don't have Shadow Kyogre, but you do have a regular Kyogre or a Primal Kyogre, you can pretty much run the exact same moveset, and I'm pretty sure if you have Primal Kyogre active, it is going to do more damage than Shadow Kyogre, but I don't typically focus on Primals or Megas when I'm doing these rocket battles. Maybe I should, but I'm usually focused on the candy grind. The next Pokemon I want to focus on is going to be Gyarados or Shadow Gyarados, so basically you want to again have Waterfall plus the Legacy Comday moveset Aqua Tail, and then you can pair it with either Crunch or Outrage. Crunch is the more preferred moveset to go for if you want to also run it in PvP. Gyarados does have relevance in the Open Master League right now, so it is definitely going to be a great dual functionality Pokemon to build, plus it also has access to the Mega Evolution. So when it comes down to Gyarados, having access to Aqua Tail is really nice on it because it's a little bit more spammy than Surf is compared to Kyogre. So it does have that going for it compared to Kyogre, but again, like Kyogre just has way better base stats, so overall Waterfall is going to do a lot more damage coming from Kyogre or Shadow Kyogre compared to Gyarados. Still though, I mean Gyarados is still a great option. It's one that a lot of players probably have in their lineup, so if you do have this, it is definitely worth building for these Rocket Grunts. Now for our next Pokemon, you're probably not going to expect this, but I'm going to recommend Ultra League Shadow Politoed or Ultra League regular Politoed. Now if you decide to go with the Shadow, you want to run Mud Shot plus Weather Ball and Blizzard, but if you decide to go with the regular, you want to run Mud Shot plus Surf and Blizzard. So I'm not sure why there's a difference in movesets here. Surf and Weather Ball are both pretty spammy water type moves, which is why I recommend using Politoed because you can really take advantage of that stun lock. And then it's also going to be an extra large Pokemon in the Ultra League format, so you would ideally need to build up a decent amount of extra large candy to actually power this up. But I mean, again, like once you have it built, you can use it for the Ultra League format and you can use it for rocket battles just as a really, really spammy Pokemon. Now speaking of spammy Pokemon though, let's go over the next Pokemon, which is going to be Shadow Swampert and regular Swampert. So ideally the best moveset you want to have on this is going to be Mud Shot plus Hydro Cannon or Muddy Water. Hydro Cannon is going to be a Legacy Comday moveset, so Muddy Water would be the alternative to that. And then you also want to have this paired together with Earthquake. Now for Swampert, because it is going to be a starter Pokemon, it's only going to cost 10,000 Stardust and 25 candy to actually unlock that secondary charge move, which makes it a really cheap investment. Now Swampert is a great Pokemon to go with because it also has access to a Mega Evolution, which you can also use in the Raid/Gym meta if you don't have access to Primal Kyogre. But we just talked about this earlier with Politoed, like the combination of a really spammy moveset plus taking advantage of the stun lock feature is huge, and Swampert really delivers on that. Moving on from our water types, so let's take a look at Shadow Raikou next with a Volt Switch plus Wild Charge and Shadow Ball. So the unfortunate downside downside to using Wild Charge in rocket battles is that Wild Charge is actually going to debuff your defense by 2 stages, so you really have to take advantage of, building up to at least 2 of these, I would say, and then throwing both of them to actually completely destroy the Pokemon. Otherwise, if you actually throw it and then they hit you back, you're going to get destroyed by the Shadow Grunts. So considering that, this is why it's going to be a great reason to have it paired with Shadow Ball as well for additional coverage, but also if you don't want to debuff your defense by 2 stages. Now, if you don't want to run Wild Charge, you can also run Thunderbolt, which is slightly worse than Wild Charge, and this won't debuff your defense by 2 stages, but I believe it takes more energy to actually get to. So in my opinion, Volt Switch plus Wild Charge is optimal, but you could run Thunderbolt as well, and then again, you do want to have it paired with Shadow Ball either way. But of course, I would work up to this if you can, because again, this is going to be a Shadow Legendary Pokemon. It is going to cost 120,000 Stardust and 120 Candy to actually give it that secondary charge move, so definitely not a cheap investment. Now you could also use the regular variant as well, but it's going to do a lot less damage with the Volt Switch compared to the Shadow. I think the Shadow is actually perfect because when it comes down to throwing back-to-back Wild Charges, it completely knocks out the Pokemon, but if I use the regular Raikou instead, it's still left over a decent amount and then my Pokemon gets knocked out after I threw that second Wild Charge. Regular Raikou still works well, but just not as good in my opinion. Next up, let's take a look at 2 poison type attackers. So the first one is going to be Nal'Ego with Poison Jab plus Sludge Bomb and Rock Slide. This is going to be the best poison type attacker to power up in the game, period, but it's also of course going to be really good to use against rocket battles. Now unfortunately, Poison Jab isn't a super heavy hitting move, so it's not going to do a lot of damage as a fast move, but again, it is the best poison type attacker in the game, so I'm just going to recommend it for that reason. But with that being said, there is actually Pokemon that I would recommend slightly more than Nal'Ego for the rocket type grunts, and that Pokemon is going to be Ultra League Alolan Muck. So for the ideal moveset, you want to go with Poison Jab plus Acid Spray and then the move of your choice. So you can either run Dark Pulse or you can go with Gunk Shot. There's definitely a few options to go with here, but the main moveset you want to have is going to be Acid Spray. This is going to debuff your opponent's defense by 2 stages, which makes it even easier to actually farm down using Poison Jab. Now there is going to be a Shadow variant for Alolan Muck as well, so you can totally run that. I personally don't have this one built, but I can only imagine how good it actually is given how much I actually use my regular variant. Both Pokemon are ranked within the top 150 for the Open Ultra League, so they're ranked decently well. Regular Alolan Muck is slightly better, it ranks at 122 with Poison Jab plus Dark Pulse and Acid Spray. Next up, let's go over 2 fighting type Pokemon that I highly recommend. The first one is of course going to be Lucario. This is the best non-Shadow, non-Mega option in the game right now. Actually, it is the best Mega option in the game too when evolved to Mega Lucario. But essentially for the best moveset, you want to go with Counter plus Power Up Punch and Aura Spear, or you could also run Shadow Ball as well. I like to pair it together with Aura Spear because once you actually get those power-up punches going to boost your attack, Aura Spear completely annihilates whatever's left in the lineup. Now with that being said, there is actually a small correction I want to make on Lucario, and this is because I got access to a new fast move during the Mega Lucario Raid Day, which is going to be Force Palm. Personally speaking, I'm still running Counter because I don't want to use the Elite Fast TM just yet. Now according to some sources, Force Palm is supposed to be better on Lucario, but I would actually love to hear from anybody in the comment section down below who has actually used both, which one you actually think is better. I know we're expecting a Counter nerf in the upcoming GBL season, so that might actually affect rocket battles as well, in which case then you might want to go with Force Palm instead, but again, that is going to require an Elite Fast TM if you didn't actually get it during this raid day. Moving on though, let's talk about a Pokemon that doesn't have the Counter and Force Palm comparison, and that Pokemon is going to be Ultra League Scrafty. So ideally you want to have Counter plus Power Up Punch and Foul Play or Thunder Punch. You can really go with either of those movesets. I think Thunder Punch is used in certain scenarios, whereas Foul Play actually benefits from Stab, which is kind of nice. Now with that being said, Ultra League Scrafty is going to be an extra large Pokemon, so you do want to power this thing up to level 50 over time. The best IV spread is going to be 9, 15, 15, so it just comes very shy of actually hitting that 2500 CP limit as the Hundo. But in this situation, guys, you could totally lucky trade it and try to get an IV spread of 12, 15, 15. That would still be really good and it would cost you half the Stardust. Now once again, the reason why I like Lucario and Ultra League Scrafty is because of their combination of Counter plus Power Up Punch. Power Up Punch, again, boosts your attack by 1 stage every single time you do it for up to 4 times. So you can build up a ton of momentum on Ultra League Scrafty, for example. But when it comes down to either of these Pokemon, they're both going to be excellent picks. Lucario is going to be the faster option, but Ultra League Scrafty is going to have a lot more bulk behind it. The next Pokemon we're going to talk about is going to be an absolute powerhouse that is going to be Shadow Rhyperior with Smackdown plus Rock Wrecker and the move of your choice. Rhyperior has access to a lot of different charge moves. I'm personally running Breaking Swipe on my Shadow Rhyperior right now, which has a chance to to debuff your opponent's attack by 1 stage, I believe. I think it's like a 50% chance, but either way, I kind of felt like that moveset was good. You could also run Superpower or Surf. Those are a bit more spammy compared to actually running Earthquake, and it also gives you more coverage that way. So yeah, Shadow Rhyperior has a lot of really good secondary charge moves to go with, but the main move you want to focus on is going to be Smackdown plus the Legacy Comde moveset Rock Wrecker. So you don't technically need Rock Wrecker on Rhyperior, you can really just take advantage of Smackdown, like that's gonna destroy the Team Go Rocket grunts, but at the end of the day, guys, it would be recommended to have it, so you can also use this for the raid/gym meta. Now with that being said, you could also go with the regular variant as well, but let me tell you this right now, the Shadow Rhyperior actually is comparable to a Mega Tyranitar and a Mega Diancie. So yeah, it's pretty crazy when you think about it that you can actually have a Mega Tyranitar, like not even Mega Evolved, with Shadow Rhyperior. Now we do have Shadow Rampardos as well, but the reason why I'm not going to recommend this Pokemon as much as Shadow Rhyperior is because Shadow Rhyperior has a lot of bulk, right? Shadow Rampardos has a lot of really good DPS, which is great for like Smackdown just by itself, but when it comes down to building up to a charge move, this is kind of where Shadow Rampardos falls short because it's such a glassy Pokemon, especially as a Shadow. The Shadow Pokemon the Team Go Rocket grunts use are really strong, so honestly, like having glassy Pokemon is a big disadvantage. You could take advantage of Stunlock in certain situations, but more bulk is typically better for these battles. Following that, we do have another kind of glassy Pokemon though, that's going to be Shadow Excadrill, but to be honest, I've used this Pokemon a decent amount, and its movesets are pretty good, right? So you ideally want to go with the Mud Slap, Scorching Sands, and Rock Slide. Mud Slap is going to be a heavy hitting fast move, so you're going to do most of the damage with that, and paired together with Scorching Sands, this is going to give you just enough coverage to actually take down the second or third Pokemon in the lineup. In the situations that I've encountered so far from this current rotation, that tends to be Alolan Muck most of the time, so having Scorching Sands does come in clutch. To be honest, I haven't really used Rock Slide in many scenarios, so honestly I wouldn't even recommend getting that secondary charge move unless you want to run it for the Open Master League. It does have relevance there, I'm not sure if it's going to have a lot of relevance next season, but as of right now, I mean, that is probably the recommended moveset to go for, except you would actually want to have Mud Shot instead of Mud Slap for that Master League meta. Taking a look at it right now though, it doesn't look like it has as much meta relevance as it once did. If we ever get the Master League Premier Cup, this Pokemon is really good, but in the Open Master League, maybe less than desirable. Now we do actually have one more Pokemon that's going to take advantage of the Mud Slap, and that is going to be Shadow Mamoswine paired together with High Horsepower and Avalanche. You could also use this as an Ice type attacker with Powder Snow plus Avalanche, so basically just swap the fast move. It's actually a really good budget Pokemon when you think about it. But when it comes down to Shadow Mamoswine with Mud Slap, it's pretty much the same concept as Shadow Excadrill, you know, farm down the first Pokemon, and then for the second or third Pokemon, you just kind of throw High Horsepower to get it done. I believe it is going to take a little bit longer to get to High Horsepower than if you were actually running Shadow Excadrill with Scorching Sand, so keep that in mind, but Shadow Mamoswine should have a bit more bulk. Now with that being said, in the overall meta, Shadow Mamoswine is the #1 Ice type attacker in the game. It's also ranked really well as a ground type attacker, so yeah, just having it paired together with that secondary charge move, High Horsepower plus Avalanche, swap the fast move from Mud Slap to Powder Snow, you pretty much have an amazing Pokemon to use for either meta. Now we do actually have one more ground type attacker to go over next, that is going to be Shadow Groudon and regular Groudon. Now I can't actually speak too much to Shadow Groudon because I don't actually have one build. That being said though, I can definitely speak to regular Groudon as I've actually used this Pokemon a significant amount. So ideally the best moveset you want to have on Groudon is going to be Mud Shot plus Precipice Blades and Fire Punch. Same thing is going to apply for the Shadow Groudon as well. Now with that being said, Precipice Blades and Fire Punch are both going to be legacy movesets, but it is totally worth giving it to it. Just trust me on that. Fire Punch is extremely spammy, which is really important for rocket battles, and Precipice Blades is a hard-hitting move you need to one-shot Pokemon. Taking a look at the upcoming meta, I'm not really sure how good Groudon is going to be in the Open Master League anymore, but previously it was one of the best, and still it is one of my top recommendations for the raid/gym meta as well as for Rockets. Moving on to our next Pokemon though, let's talk about another GOAT in the overall meta that is going to be Shadow Mewtwo with Confusion plus Psystrike and the move of your choice. Now Mewtwo has access to a ton of different charge moves. Psystrike is going to be the legacy signature moveset for it, so I do highly recommend giving this to your best Shadow Mewtwo if you do have it. It makes a big difference, trust me. But if you don't have it, you could also go with Psychic instead, which would be the next best option. Now paired together with the secondary charge move, the recommended moveset to go for is Shadow Ball, but it has access to so many other moves, you can go with any of these as well. Ice Beam, Flamethrower, Thunderbolt, Focus Blast, or Hyper Beam. So they all provide different coverage for Mewtwo, which I think is excellent. Now personally speaking, I think Psystrike plus Shadow Ball is the ultimate combo, but that also requires 2 Elite TMs, so if you don't have 2 Elite TMs you want to use on Mewtwo and you want to go for the more budget option, I think Psychic plus Ice Beam could be a good moveset to have on it, but if you do have the Elite TMs, definitely Psystrike for sure. Now when it comes down to PvP for Mewtwo in the Open Master League, you do want to switch switch the fast move from Confusion to Psycho Cut, but when you actually use it in the raid/gym meta as well as for rocket battles, you want to definitely have Confusion. This is a very heavy hitting move, and Confusion is going to destroy anything that's going to be weak to it. So in most situations that is going to be the poison type grunts, but it also does super effective damage against the fighting type grunts as well. Speaking of more Pokemon that do super effective damage against the fighting type grunts, though, we have the fairy types coming up next, starting off with Shadow Gardevoir and regular Gardevoir. So ideally the best moveset you want to have is going to be Charm plus Dazzling Gleam and Triple Axle. Triple Axle is a pretty spammy moveset, and then Dazzling Gleam is going to give you that fairy type coverage for a heavy hitting move. Paired together with Charm, which does heavy damage as a fast move, this is going to be a really good Pokemon. The only downside is that Gardevoir is a little bit on the glassy side, so maybe not as desirable if you're going to be going up against a really tough rocket battle, but you know, for the most part, taking down the fighting type grunts is going to be a breeze with Gardevoir. This Pokemon also has access to a Mega Evolution as well, so you can totally use it if you want to. We do have another option though in terms of a fairy type attacker, that is going to be Togekiss with Charm plus Ancient Power and the move of your choice. So you could go with Aura Spear, which is the Legacy Common Day moveset for Togekiss. You could also go with Flamethrower, you can go with Dazzling Gleam, or you could go with Aerial Ace. So I like to go with Aerial Ace personally. There's no Legacy movesets required on this, and it does actually provide some good coverage, especially against those fighting type grunts. Not to mention Togekiss can also be used in the Master League format. It's not really that good anymore, but at one time, guys, at one time Togekiss was the GOAT. So it's totally up to you what you want to end up running on it, but honestly, like if you have Shadow Mewtwo with Confusion plus Side Strike, you don't really need anything else. Next up, let's go over some of the best dark type attackers to use. So first up, we have Shadow Tyranitar, which is going to be the GOAT. Bite plus Brutal Swing and Stone Edge is going to be the recommended moveset here. When it comes down to Shadow Tyranitar compared to the regular Tyranitar, I feel like this definitely has a good advantage with that extra shadow damage, because you're mainly going to be powering down using Bite, right? You don't even really have to throw any charge moves until you get to that third Pokemon. But with regular Tyranitar, you may get right to the end before the Shadow Pokemon actually throws a charge move against you, making it take a little bit longer, opposed to actually Shadow Tyranitar just powering down all the way and avoiding that charge move from the opponent. At the end of the day though, both are going to be incredibly good options to go for. Tyranitar also has access to a Mega Evolution, which is super good to use in the raid/gym meta as well. Now I mentioned earlier that you could also go with Stone Edge as the secondary charge move, but to be honest, you don't really need to have this. Brutal Swing is going to be more than enough. We do actually have one more dark type attacker to go over, that's going to be Hydreigon with Bite plus Brutal Swing. So Brutal Swing on Hydreigon is actually going to be a Legacy Common Day moveset, so in most situations having a Tyranitar is going to be more accessible, but both of these Pokemon are pretty rare to get. Either way, like they're both going to be really good to use against the Team Go Rocket grunts. Following that, let's go over a few Dragon type attackers you guys may want to use. The first one is going to be Dragonite with Dragon Breath plus Dragon Claw and Super Power. No Legacy movesets required on this Pokemon, which is really nice. And Super Power is going to provide good coverage for Dragonite, whereas Dragon Breath is a super spammy moveset to go with as far as a charge move goes. You could also go with Dragon Tail on Dragonite if you want to, but to be honest, I think Dragon Breath is a lot better. Now Dragonite has relevance in the Open Master League as well, so you can definitely get some dual functionality out of this Pokemon if you want to. And we have actually had quite a few events this past year where we had Dratini available, and we also have Shadow Dratini available in Rocket Grunts right now, so getting a potential good IV spread on Shadow Dragonite is very much possible. And that Pokemon has relevance in the Open Ultra League as well. I don't know if it's going to be still relevant in the upcoming season. Regardless though, Dragonite has maintained some great relevance in the overall meta, a strong Pokemon that I would recommend powering up. Next up, let's talk about Shadow Salamence and regular Salamence. So this Pokemon is good, but it's not like super good, right? And I'm going to explain why. So Shadow Salamence, or just regular Salamence I should say, is more on the glassier side as a Dragon type attacker. Like this Pokemon is going to get hit hard, but it also dishes out a ton of damage, especially the Shadow. This Pokemon is great to use in the raid/gym meta, and honestly, like you can power through a lot of Pokemon just as a general attacker with Shadow Salamence, but when it comes down to a little bit more strategic play, I mean, you can't really take advantage of Stun Lock because getting to Outrage takes forever. Same thing with his other movesets. Like the next best option would be Fly, but even then, that's still going to take some time and you're probably going to get knocked out before you actually get to it. Now following that, we also have Rayquaza with Dragon Tail plus Breaking Swipe and Dragon Ascent. So Breaking Swipe is going to be a legacy moveset, and then Dragon Ascent is going to be an exclusive moveset you can only get when you use a Meteorite on your Rayquaza. So most of you that were able to play through the last two Mega Rayquaza raid days probably have a Meteorite available to use. Maybe you already used it, in which case like you already have Dragon Ascent on your Rayquaza, so that's already good to go. Now when it comes down to Breaking Swipe, like you don't need to have this moveset, but again, it is kind of recommended if you're going to be using it because it is a bit more spammy compared to having Outrage. Dragon Ascent is a really high energy moveset, so it's good for heavy damage if you just want to like knock out that Pokemon, but building up to it takes a lot of time time, building up to Breaking Swipe is much quicker. I really like this combination of movesets personally, and before Breaking Swipe was nerfed in Pokemon GO, this was excellent to use. We do have one more Dragon type attacker I want to go over, probably one of my favorites to use right now because it combines like all the things I like about Dragon type attackers. It has a really good fast move as Dragon Breath, it has a really good charge move as Aqua Tail, and it also has a really heavy hitting move as Spatial Rend. I pretty much gave it away at this point, but it's going to be Palkia in its origin form. This Pokemon was only available during the Sinnoh Tour, so at this point in time you can only get it from trades if you don't already have it. Palkia is also going to be one of the best Pokemon to use in the Open Master League, and it's also like one of the top Dragon type attackers to use in game right now, non-Shadow, non-Mega. All around, like, this Pokemon is phenomenal. It's easily one of my favorites to use, and seriously, if you ever have a Pokemon that you can potentially get from Lucky Trades and you don't have Palkia Origin Form, make this one of your top picks. You will not regret it. Now, I do also want to mention that Spatial Rend is going to be an exclusive moveset that you were only able to get during that event. So if you don't actually have it, you have to trade for it. You can't actually use an Elite TM to get this moveset because it's actually an adventure effect. So let me just tell you this right now, having access to an adventure effect, being relevant in raid/gym battles, being relevant in rocket battles, being relevant in the Open Master League, this Pokemon is the GOAT. Like, it's literally everything you want packed into one. So I definitely saved the best for last right there, but we do actually have one more Pokemon I want to go over. That Pokemon is going to be Melmetal, which evolves from Melton. The ideal moveset you want to have is going to be Thunder Shock plus Superpower and Rock Slide, or Double Iron Bash. Double Iron Bash was a research exclusive moveset, I believe, so basically it's just a legacy moveset. You can Elite TM to get it if you want it. Now, personally speaking, I did actually give my Shundo Melmetal Double Iron Bash, and I actually really like using it. It's a really spammy moveset, so if you do have the hundo, I do think it's worth using, but if you don't have the hundo, then, you know, keep grinding out those Melton boxes. Anyways, with that being said, that's pretty much everything I have for you guys in this video. If you feel like I missed any Pokemon, let me know in the comment section down below. I would love to try out new builds and put together more strategies for even better videos during the next rotation, but if you guys do want to check out some more content, I'm going to recommend these two videos right here. And before you go, don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe, and I'll see you all real soon in the next one.